Well, this is of course the all-new Santa Cruz Bullit, the bike that has the internet in meltdown this week as it's just gone live. Now Blake, our man, was lucky enough to get an opportunity to travel to Slovenia in Europe to get a first-hand test drive of this bike pre-launch. He's just back in Australia, so thought we'd just chat to him a bit about the bike, how it rode and how it experienced. So mate, kick us off. What was the camp like when you first rocked up? And
it was absolutely epic. This is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to do anything like that. So obviously it was a little bit of a deer in headlights, like there was a lot of excitement and, you know, unknowns and all that sort of stuff. I've ridden plenty in Europe before, so I knew what to expect from that. But yeah, overall the whole experience was absolutely epic. Yeah.
Now, Santa Cruz were pretty tight-lipped, weren't they, on what the bike was going to be. So when you first got to see the bike, what was your first impressions?
Look, I mean, you know, I'd had a couple of conversations leading up to it thinking, surely it's got to be, you know, an upsized Vala. Like they've gone to so much effort and, you know, developed that Vala, you know, to the nth degree. Surely this is going to be based on the same sort of frame set. And we were right. But it's not just, you know, they haven't just added another 20 mil of travel. It's specifically designed around being a bigger bike, but there is a lot of overlay in the development and the testing and all that sort of stuff.
So let's dive into that a little bit more. What were some of the things, obviously, at the press camp, there was you got access to engineers and a few people that were hands-on in R&D of the new Bullit. What was some of the sort of insight that they were able to give you about kind of what they was going after when they wanted to design? Because obviously the Bullit was already in the range, but this thing's dramatically different. So what were some of the things they were chasing? 100%.
So like, naturally, like the Vala was released, just over 12 months ago now, I think, off the top of my head. The bikes were actually developed and, you know, tested basically hand in hand. Like the Vala did start before the Bullit, but this has been in the works for a long time. Like you don't just, you know, draw it down on a napkin and be like, oh yeah, let's make this. Like there's months and months and years worth of testing and development that goes into like an overhaul redesign. Naturally, like Santa Cruz are known and loved for years and years and years about their VPP suspension linkage. So for them to change completely to a 4-bar linkage on their e-bikes is, you know, it doesn't just happen overnight, but the advantages that they've pulled out of that by getting the motor lower down and not compromising their suspension with the VPP to try and fit the motor in and around it, it's amazing.
It definitely makes a lot of sense. And I think we rode a lot, like we spent a lot of time riding the Vala. You might see some other videos on our channel. And it just worked. Like, it was a no-brainer. The 4-bar just really suited that bike. It still rode familiar to how a Santa Cruz kind of has that character and personality. But it just makes a lot more sense to open up that area around the motor and whatnot, moving to the Bosch power system. So yeah, it makes a ton of sense really that Santa Cruz have capitalized that. They know they've got the motor that everyone wants and the performance is ridiculous. They've got the feeling. So then to supersize the bike and make it something that's going to conquer that whole mountain. Tell us, the linkage, obviously 4-bar, is it the same, exact same design, or have they had to tweak it a little bit to get that extra travel into the Bullit?
While the layout is the same and the link looks the same, they are uniquely themselves. Yeah, like basically the suspension system has a similar feeling through the kinematics and that kind of thing. But they do definitely ride differently on the trail. Like they are tailored to, you know, the Vala obviously being like that mid-travel trail bike type of feeling, whereas the Bullit 170, it is, you know, labelled as downhill bike with a built-in chairlift, and it is just that. Like it'll still happily climb up the trails. It's actually got the steepest seat angle out of any bike that Santa Cruz make at the moment. So, you know, it is a bit of a mountain goat in that aspect. Obviously, you know, we've got more than enough power with the Bosch CX motor to get up any hill, but man, as soon as this thing's pointing downhill and you let go of those brakes, it's a completely different beast. Like
unreal. So yeah, it's a dual, it's an exclusive mullet. So it's obviously 27.5 in the rear, 29 front, and carbon fiber. Even though there's 4 or 5 different specs that they make, they all are using that carbon fiber frame, which is really, really cool. Now, let's talk a bit about the chairlift side. You haven't spent a bunch of time on the new, this is obviously the Gen 5, the latest and greatest version of the Performance CX motor, which is probably the most popular motor on the market across all bike brands, regardless of what's written on the down tube. Tell us a bit about how you got on with the Bosch motor and how you found its sort of performance and the feel, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, so just by luck, like I haven't actually spent a lot of time on this motor. So my first proper like big days on the bike with this motor was at the press camp, and I gotta tell you, believe the hype. Like, this motor is absolutely insane. You know, obviously Bosch are a much bigger company than just making e-bike motors. Like, they've got their hands in everything, and you know, they've got a lot of different departments that they can not fall back on, but pull resources from, and you know, product development, all that sort of stuff. They make everything from dishwashers to power tools, like you name it. Like, they are a high-end electronics company. So, you know, to think that, you know, this is just an off-the-shelf thing, like, it's not the case at all. They've got so many different aspects. They've just ticked all the boxes. It's super reliable, super quiet, like, and the power is, you know, it's second to none.
It's a very impressive. And I guess, I mean, even the previous version of this motor was impressive, and they've just gone and taken that and up the ante a little higher. Now, mate, tell us a bit about some of the kind of trails you rode over there. You rode for a couple of days, we know. You know, with the kind of more XC stuff, was it big or Alpsy stuff? What sort of trails?
Yeah, so the first day was a massive day on the bike. It's probably the biggest day I've had on a bike in a long time. And it was like your quintessential European sort of backcountry trails. So we were pedaling up some climbs where, like, you know, I was looking at it and going, we're not making it up that. And we'd sort of winch ourselves up.
The clouds.
Yeah, pretty literally, like, up into the clouds. Like, the first day, we got lucky, there was no rain, but it was bloody chilly. But yeah, awesome, like loamy, like slick routes everywhere. So really, the first day was, you know, sort of more natural trails out in the hills, that kind of thing, with a massive array, like everything from sort of trail riding to some proper downhill trails, super steep chutes, quite slick, all that sort of stuff. And then the second day, we're actually in the Maribor bike park. So a couple of the more old school guys will remember Sam Hill's, you know, famous Maribor World Cup races and that kind of stuff. Literally rode the World Cup downhill track there, everything down to, you know, their blue and their green flow trails. Had a huge array of, you know, options, and we were just hitting back-to-back laps, playing around with the different frame geometry adjustments, the linkage adjustments, playing with stack height, really getting comfortable on the bike and experiencing it set up exactly how I wanted it. Whereas the first day, kind of just set and forget a little bit, and was focusing on, you know, the overall feeling of the bike as it was. And then the next day we played around with settings and that kind of thing a bit more.
Real. Sounds like an amazing variety of trails.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how the bike handled then. What was your takeaway of your, you know, what are some of the trail notes you kind of had from the first couple of days? What sort of performance are we talking in this thing?
It is just a beast in its own when the trails get steep. So naturally it's a lot more, it's tailored to be a lot more of an aggressive bike than the Vala. Like, the Vala is a, you know, courses for courses. It'll do a little bit of everything. Whereas this is, man, you point this thing down a hill, doesn't matter how rough it is, how chopped out it is, slick routes, like you name it. This thing just wants to absolutely pin it. So basically, one of the conversations that I've had with Scotty, who this is his long-term test bike, is the thing just tracks. Like, that was his first comment. The thing just tracks straight down the hill, or wherever you want it to go, really. It's a long travel bike, but you can change direction so easily on it. You can pitch the bike wherever you want it, thanks to the, you know, the lower sort of center of gravity. And you really get a big feeling of change between, like, the height. So it's got a high and a low setting on the geometry, and it's got a high and a low progression within the suspension. Both are completely independent of each other. And you know what, to be honest, some of the bikes out there, we make that high and low change.
Doesn't seem to do much.
You can feel it a little bit, but it's not enough to really write home about. This really does make the bike feel different, and you can set it up exactly how you like it.
What about under braking? Like, how's the 4-bar working or feeling compared to some of the VPP bikes you've ridden compared to some of the other bikes in this category that you've ridden?
Yeah. So
how's that rear wheel tracking?
Basically, like, although it is a 4-bar layout, in talking, so we were lucky enough to have Kieran McKinnon. He's like basically the head suspension designer at Santa Cruz. Whilst the layout is 4-bar, he's really done everything that he can do to make it feel like a VPP. Obviously, it's, you know, it's not apples for apples, but the suspension curves, the all-around kinematics of it all, it does actually feel like a VPP. Like, I know Santa Cruz have copped some slack, and I've even gotten a few messages going, oh, like, you know, it's not a real Santa Cruz. It's like, well, it might not look like, you know, your stereotypical VPP bike, but out on the trail, if you were doing blind testing, you would struggle to feel the difference.
Well, exactly. And if every brand stuck with, like if Ferrari stuck with the ones, it would still be driving around in Dinos.
Exactly.
Brands have to evolve, and when you're chasing performance, chasing those targets, it really shouldn't, I think, matter.
Should not matter
How it looks.
Yeah.
I mean, this bike looks amazing.
Yeah.
Like this would have to be one of the best looking e-bikes,
Yeah.
mountain bikes I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about chasing the performance targets and trying to get that ride characteristic and feel. So, you know, the fact that they're able to achieve that in a different layout, then I think that speaks in volumes in itself.
Exactly.
We've spoken a lot about the things you like about the bike. Are there any kind of downsides, or did you find any barriers that you kind of came against to be like not totally convinced on, or have they pretty much knocked it?
Potentially the only barrier that I found is depending on the rider. So this is like for me personally, the difference between the high and the low progression in the suspension. I don't think that I would ever utilize the high.
Okay.
Then that's just me, my riding style, how I like my suspension set up. Is it really a negative? Well, no, it just means you set and forget it in low.
So tell us a little bit about the difference in the low setting. How does it feel compared to in that high setting? What differences that appeals to you as opposed to?
To me, like maybe the high progression is too progressive. But then again, you know, I didn't really have that much time to fully play around with shock settings. We didn't really have the opportunity to play around with, you know, the air can sizes, or, you know, put the reducers in there, things like that. So, you know, that's one thing on that front. Outside of that, to be honest, like for me, I tried finding faults with it. I really struggled. Like they've just,
that's fair enough.
It's basically, you know, Kieran was saying around like the whole change to 4-bar and that kind of thing, every single aspect about the bike has been designed for performance. So, you know, Santa Cruz are willing to, you know, for lack of a better term, die on their sword with the VPP in the e-bike and chase performance, purely performance. So everything from, you know, linkage bearings to the spec that they've chosen to, you know, across the different models, all that kind of thing. It is just descending performance for this bike.
Unreal. Well, I guess it's pretty obvious, but let's talk about the kind of rider that's going to get the most out of the Bullit compared to maybe a Vala or compared to just anything else out there.
So as I've always sort of said, like you really need to, you know, choose your bike for where you ride the most. My local trails they're short in length, but they're quite steep. They're very aggressive. They need an aggressive sort of bike. They don't necessarily need this much travel, although it is very, very nice to have when things go pear-shaped. So like if you're the type of rider who is a winch and descend type of rider where, you know, you're climbing up steep trails and your whole focus is on the descent, this is gonna be your boy. Like this is gonna be there for you the whole way. You know, every descent that you're on, it'll be right there with you, helping you out along the way. Whereas the Vala is gonna be, you know, a bit more of a trail focused. When the going gets super, super rough, you might run out of bike, for lack of a better term. Like whether that's, you know, it's not quite, the head angle is a little bit too steep, or you do actually physically need a bit more travel. Whereas if you're happy to ride around, you know, your trail centers, dabble in some steep descents, but that's not your focus, then the Vala might be a bit more for you.
But the Bullit is just that real aggressive,
100%.
Get the gravity on.
Yeah.
Now, it's really impressive. One thing I noticed when we basically picked the bike up is it's light. In its lightest setting, it's just over 21 kilos. And through the rest of the lower specs, I guess you'd say, it's still only in like 22, low 22.
Yeah.
So very, very light. Usually to get a bike light, you have to have a tiny battery. What have they done? Because I remember you saying you were doing the big days over there without sort of having to charge up. What sort of battery has this thing got, and what kind of range did you find you're able to get out of it?
So Santa Cruz have spec'd this the only option you have is a 600 watt hour battery. And again, in talking to Kieran, he played around with battery sizes in order to, you know, figure out where they wanted to land with it. Their reasoning for 600 is to save some weight from where you don't want the weight. So naturally, you can either go a wider battery, and, you know, we've seen bikes with disgusting massive down tubes to keep that weight lower down with the bigger battery, or you can, you know, have a beautifully shaped down tube like this and have your battery sitting, you know, just for example, here to here. if you want to go to an 800 watt hour battery, you're going to push that weight further up, pushing more weight onto the front wheel where you don't necessarily want it all the time, which is, again, that's sacrificing performance, especially with descending. This bike's built to descend steep trails, so if you're putting more and more weight over the front wheel, you know, you're having undesirable effects on your suspension setup, you know, your body position on the bike and that kind of thing. So that's why they've landed on 600 watt hours, but being in a Bosch system, they do also offer the 250 watt hour PowerMore add-on, which is, you know, adding the weight when you do run that centrally in the bike. So again, it's in a more desirable location than further up the front of the bike. But honestly, this new Bosch motor is so damn efficient. The overall weight of the bike is low for a full-size e-bike. So the first day riding, we did 39.8 kilometers. We were out there for about 6 hours and did, I think it was 2,500 meters vert climbing. So
is that out of one battery?
That was one battery.
One 600
I still had one bar left, and I was done. I had nothing. They offered us if we wanted the PowerMore. I said, "You can keep that. I'm going to have a beer."
Yeah, that's a huge day, right?
Yeah.
You know, most people, 99.9% of people, are never going to be really doing that, or if they are, it's going to be once or twice a year.
Exactly right. And you know, you do still have the option of getting the PowerMore range extender on there. And I've actually heard, you know, in talking to a couple of the European guys, which they've been in and out of shops where I'm surprised this isn't happening locally, where, for example, a Santa Cruz dealer who is selling these bikes, the PowerMore, you can use it on the Vala as well. The shop will actually have a couple of PowerMores that you can rent for a weekend, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is a fantastic idea. Or, you know, you could even do it yourself. You buy one for yourself, chuck it up on Marketplace. You know, you rent your PowerMore out for the weekend to other Bosch riders.
Definitely about to do. It's furthermore to the point that you made earlier though about you pick the bike that's going to suit the majority of the trails you ride.
Exactly.
I think the same should be said about battery. Like, you want to opt for a battery that covers majority rides. So if you're riding, you know, one afternoon and then during the week and then on the weekends, you're not going to be needing 800 watts hour. But if you have like one trip planned for, you know, Christmas next year, like, why then lug all that around with you the whole time? So going for a smaller battery but it still works makes tons of sense, because you're adding performance, taking away weight from the bike. So again, increasing the performance, how much you can throw the bike around.
100%.
So that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Blake, well, I guess that kind of wraps us up. You've gone pretty deep down the rabbit hole on this thing. Clearly a very impressive bike, very, very different than the previous generation Bullit.
Oh yeah.
But it makes sense to sort of draw from the lessons learned that they got with the Vala, which obviously speaks itself, incredibly good performance. So yeah, to see the big brother of the Vala come on in the guise of the Bullit, 170mm travel front and rear, big gravity bike, mate. It sounds like Santa Cruz have absolutely nailed this one and really bolstered that e-bike range. Obviously we've got the Heckler SL, the Vala, and now this big boy, the Bullit. So yeah, super excited. Like Blake alluded, this actual bike here was sent up, which Scott's going to be doing a long-term review on. And so yeah, we're going to have plenty more coverage, a different style of review, obviously the way you like your bikes handled, the way Scott. So it's going to be really interesting to compare those two kind of versions, those trail notes, and hear what Scott thinks. But for now, that's Blake's wrap up of the Bullit. Thanks a bunch for going to the press camp for us as well, mate. And
pleasure's all mine.
We'll see you in our next video.